I've really been getting back into Yu-Gi-Oh! These past few years, and there's a lot of stuff I find really neat about it that I could absolutely do an essay on. No, I'm not well versed enough in the new stuff or even the mid stuff to be able to say anything of note. Plus, that stuff is talked about to death anyway. Ugh, this one has already been done to death too. I even once cut down an entire 6 episodes of the English dub of Yu-Gi-Oh! To 19 minutes to experiment with real-time editing.
You can even check the description for that.
I could, and it would definitely be worthwhile in an educational sense to research and compile all that info in one place. But I got back into this game on a personal note. I want this essay to be about something I care about.
No.
None of this is good enough. But my turn is just starting. Come on, what do you really want to talk about?
This duel is over!
Ready, 1, 2, and... Nice.
I played Yu-Gi-Oh! A lot as a kid, around the time that the second arc of the series was premiering on Kids WB. For those of you that don't know, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is an anime created by Konami to sell a Magic the Gathering adjacent children's card game. Or at least it was a children's card game and a fairly accessible one at that. I fell out of playing the game around middle school, and the game has evolved since then from having 6 basic forms of card to more than that. So when I first got back, I had a choice, you know, learn all this new intricate, accessible stuff that isn't relevant to me or even why I played the game in the first place, or played the game how I fucking want, with like-minded friends in low-stakes, fun environments. Yeah, I know, it's a really tough one.
But in truth, playing is not really my favorite part of the card game. That really only serves as like a side thing, you know, next to what I actually enjoy about Yu-Gi-Oh!
I'm talking about deck building. I like deck building a lot more than I actually like playing the real game, and I kind of want to make sense of that with you, you know, whether you've played the game or not. But if you haven't played the game,
I am not going to teach you how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now. That's not the point of this section of the video. I do want to give you a brief rundown of the bare basics just to inform how one might approach building a deck. So casual players, you could just skip ahead to this timestamp, or you could stick around and critique my analysis. Don't do that.
I will also not be talking specifics tied to specific play formats because it's irrelevant. This is mainly supposed to be for newcomers that are just coming off the street. You know, someone just walks up to your table while you're playing cards and goes, "Hey, what?" And, you know, explain to me like I'm 5 type stuff. So, typically 2 players both start with life points and draw 5 cards. It's a turn-based game, the most common goal of which being to get your opponent's life points to 0. How do you do that? Well, you have a deck of cards that you can typically draw from once at the start of every turn, and a playing field. You have monsters which have points that could contribute to or defend from the loss of either player's life points. You also have spell cards and trap cards that do all sorts of different stuff depending on what the card text says. You can defend your monsters, destroy your opponent's monsters, inflict damage to your opponent's life points, let you draw more cards faster, let your opponent draw cards faster, give your opponent cards, take your opponent's cards, protect your life points, bring back destroyed monsters, enhance the power of your monsters, and even just win the whole game without touching your opponent's life points.
Yes, this is still the gist. And it isn't even what I consider to be the inaccessible part of the game yet.
The last thing that I just mentioned is rare. It's called a win condition, which there are only certain cards in the game that actually can do this. They allow you to win the game if you're able to get all of the specific things in line that the card requires, and that makes them a lot more precarious to have in your deck. You therefore usually have to end up structuring your entire deck around the win condition if that's how you want to win. Do you see where I'm going with this?
Before I get there, in a roundabout way, life points are not the only target a player can focus on to win a duel. It's considered the main goal, but there are other things that can secure a win, such as win conditions, or more notably, your opponent's deck running out before yours does. So, in total, if winning is your goal, you have 3 different means with which to do that, which allows you some options when constructing your deck.
Each player builds a deck of between 40 to 60 cards.
There are limits to what you could put in there. Typically you can have only between 1 and 3 of the same card in a deck, and there are even banned cards, which, you aren't allowed to have in a deck at all. Due to the changing nature of the game, some cards were banned outright, which, cowards.
So we have our win goal, and we know that we have more than one way to achieve it. Let's just focus on life point depletion specifically for this example because it is the most commonly used one.
We can fill our decks with really strong monsters who can attack and deplete our opponents with raw power. The downside is that the stronger the monster, the typically more difficult it is to get it on the field. So we have to build around that now. We add more cards that assist you in getting your powerful monsters to the field or to your hand. Suddenly, the deck itself has a function. The cards work in tandem, and the strategy is constructed with that goal in mind. We can also fill the deck with cards whose effect it is to inflict damage to your opponent. It doesn't just have to be through power. You can run your opponent's life points down this way as well. They call this strategy burning, which is apt. I like that term a lot. Let's say you want your opponent's deck to run out first. Then you build your deck around cards that force your opponent to draw and discard cards rapidly. There's a name for this too. It's called milling, which, it's admittedly less great. It's fine.
And for win conditions, you'll simply have to build around that specific wins requirement in order for the win to happen.
The most common example is the Exodia cards. You can only win if all 5 pieces of the guy are in your hand, so you build with that in mind. Most people with Exodia decks just fill the deck with cards that let them draw a bunch of times so that they can collect the pieces faster. But there are other ways to get cards to your hand fast, like from the deck strategies, from the graveyard strategies, or even from the field strategies.
You don't need to know what any of that means. The whole point of me even bringing this up is to just show how hefty your options are in building a deck.
Even more interesting, once these methods of victory are solidified, decks can then also be built to counteract those strategies. I once had a deck that I specifically called an Exodia Killer. It was full of cards that made it harder for my opponent to draw faster, to burn them before they could manage to draw what they needed, or to let me remove cards from their hand or deck outright so they couldn't have all 5 pieces. So you work not only offensively with your own strategy, but defensively, potentially with your opponent's strategy in mind. It makes the interaction more personal. It's not just about how you've built your deck anymore, it's also about how your opponent built theirs too.
That's kinda silly, right? Playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Personally, it's a strategic game. It's about outsmarting your opponent, making the faster move, right? It's about thinking a little bit quicker than the other guy. It's about having more money than somebody else so you could afford all the best structured decks. It's about winning!
You ready? I've been telegraphing it pretty hard, so I hope you are.
Watch my essays and discussion videos regularly are probably pretty confused up to this point. This is not typically the kind of thing I do. A lot of the things I talk about are usually rooted in, well, not necessities and not certainties. That's why I don't make math and science videos. I make videos on art and media analysis. There's a little bit more fluidity to what I am usually interested in.
So why Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck building? Right? I mean, it seems like you have a ceiling to how you can build. Other than about a couple dozen different strategies and options, you still only have 3 goals if you want to win. Exactly, if you want to win.
There's a bit of a trade-off I tend to experience in discussions with newer players about why I prefer the original format of the game before the introduction of the more intense mechanics. I like a slow game. Yu-Gi-Oh! Always felt to me like chess, a back and forth, a sort of theater. In fact, the anime actually exemplified this pretty well. You were controlling monsters, you know, each turn felt like it was building to some form of apex. Your opponent was anxious about making certain moves in fear of triggering a trap you set, or a monster effect. The game wasn't just the strategy, it was the person in front of you.
I played a one-on-one game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Recently that I will never forget. And I lost it. Let me start by saying that. I did not win. But it was the most fun game that I've ever played because there was tension. The tension was palpable. My opponent was confused by what I was doing. And, you know, at least to me, and hopefully to him as well, you know, the game was worth the time that we took on it.
He was playing with a deck that, compared to mine, was way newer. And I knew that with my current play style that I most likely was not going to win the duel. It kind of wasn't my goal at that point anymore because I already knew about the difference. So the goal had to change. So instead of needing to win the game, I thought maybe, hey, I'm gonna stall it.
I call this deck Wait For It, which is what it sounds like. You know, it's full of cards that make it harder for my opponent to attack me, lets me gain life points really rapidly, and overall just stalls the game for a really long time and makes it difficult for my opponent to do very much to me. And, you know, there are strategies around this deck. There are things you could do, but typically new players don't play with a strategy this brazenly stupid in mind from their opponents. So my opponent wasn't prepared for Wait For It.
The duel lasted at least 40 minutes and at most an hour. I'm pretty sure by new meta standards that's fucking ridiculous. I had gotten him down to 1 card in his deck and had 4 out of 5 cards necessary to pull off a win condition. And then he beat me in his last turn anyway, which...
It was amazing. There was a rapport. There was kind of like this unknown excitement about who the winner was going to be, like for a good stretch of the game. I got to basically on my end start off saying, oh, I'm not even going to make it that far and I know it, to, hey, I'm actually surprised I'm still in this, to, wait, I might actually have a shot, to, oh, okay, never mind, but good game.
The value of this game for me comes from the interaction more than the outcome. The actual artistry of deck building appears to outdo the initial purpose of the game you're building for. My best moments in a duel have never been related to a win because, well, I don't win often, but instead to the look on my opponent's face when I use a card that no player in their right mind would use in a standard modern duel.
It's not chaos outright, you know, the card is in my deck for a reason, but they typically don't know what that reason is, and especially if your opponent is playing with a different playstyle and goal as you, it's gonna be chaos to them. You know, and if that doesn't guarantee you a win or even the chance at a win, it at the very least gives you a shot at an emotional reaction, which to me is so much better.
Yugi, here! Take this!
Huh? Grandpa?
I built this deck. I put my soul in these cards. And I taught you everything I know, Yugi.
Deck building is, I think, a really interesting alternative entry point into Yu-Gi-Oh! Because it allows for us to approach this card game from a perspective that I truly believe it was selling itself as in the earliest days of its conception. A perspective that I think is the reason I liked playing it as a kid. It enabled players to approach it as a game where you can personalize your strategies and essentially bring yourself to the game. I've sort of adopted the term strategic theming to describe this. They did it all the time in the show itself. You had duelists that specialized in certain monster types, like a dinosaur guy, an insect guy, an ocean guy, a ghost guy. But you also had characters with more non-literal themes, like a guy who relies on luck and fate to progress, having a deck that is primarily punctuated by card effects that require dice rolls or coin tosses. Joey's a fucking gambler from Brooklyn, baby!
Monsters? Real monsters!
Practically every player in the show built their decks personally. They strategized with cards they felt connections to, or in ways that would never guarantee a win. Unless, you know, you're this fucking guy. But always either meant something or showcased something else. There were some ideas in certain duels in the show that were so fun to me, they totally overshadowed the actual narrative wins. As a kid, that's what resonated the most with me about the card game, by extension. I built losing deck after losing deck, but it was never boring to play because I got to show my opponent what I personally was made of.
I currently have 7 locked-in decks and about 5 more that I'm just working on kind of casually on the side. And each of these decks kind of portrays like a different aspect of me. You know, my personality, maybe a little bit of my vanity, and overall, I guess my hope that, you know, I can bring an experience to other players that maybe they wouldn't have considered. It's always fun. I don't know if it's always sensible. Yeah, it's not one of the top structure decks that comes sold and ready with built-in strategies and need only minor tweaks right out of the box, but it's me, you know? It's something I built. And if you're slightly more interested in a good game than anything else, I would really suggest, you know, giving deck building from scratch a try. You know, it'd be really nice to meet you. Oh. I won. Sweet.